All right. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mariela, I'm a manager within HITT's R&D team. I want to thank you all for joining us today for our Master Series event focused on prefabrication and manufacturing. If it happens to be your first time tuning into a Master Series, this is an event that HITT puts together, and we use this time as an opportunity to dive into hot topics and challenges within the construction industry. We take advantage of this event to bring together industry experts to share insights, innovations, and their experience and expertise. Now, before we dive into our event, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. First are the learning objectives of what we would like to go over during this event and accomplish today. We're going to talk about introduction to prefabrication and construction manufacturing, dive a little bit into the venture capital world, understand the components of industrialized construction, identify some key trends in today's methods, analyze how these strategies address challenges such as labor shortages that we have today in construction, discuss skills, training, and the mindset shifts that are needed for the industry to embrace these innovations. And then we're going to go into some case studies. If you are an AIA and would like to earn credit for this event, please email us after the event and our team will send you a certificate. This event gives you 1 learning credit. We do have a Q&A section for this event, and you can submit your questions as we go along. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end of the session to go over some questions that we received today and ones that we received previously. And by the way, thank you so much for sending those questions ahead of time. Wanted to kick things off with a safety moment as we do at every meeting at HITT, and today's safety moment is back to school safety. So as schools reopen, please remember to slow down and stay alert in school zones and neighborhoods. Watch for children crossing the streets, especially near buses and crosswalks. Always stop for the school buses when their lights are on and their little stop sign is out. Stay cautious behind the wheel helps protect our kids and keep our community safe. And please stay off your phones. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists that we have today. Super excited to have them here with us. First, we have Mayra Arntz. She's a senior associate at Building Ventures, focusing on early stage startups in the construction technology space. She began her career as a control project manager on commercial and mining projects, where she applied lean construction concepts and worked with various construction software, including BIM tools. Before joining Building Ventures, Mayra served as a strategy lead at Stanley X, which is the innovation division of Stanley Black & Decker, and was the head of product at Holo Builder, acquired by Faro Technologies in 2021. We also have with us Andy Loff. Andy is the CEO of Building Composites, a company specializing in advanced structural engineering and manufacturing solutions. He is a hands-on serial entrepreneur with an extensive background in structural engineering, business development, construction, manufacturing, and technology development. Prior to becoming CEO of Building Composites, Andy founded multiple successful engineering and fabrication companies utilizing composite materials and other advanced solutions. For those of you that don't know, Building Composites is the company engineering and manufacturing the prefabricated building skin system that we will be using in our new headquarters that is currently under construction. Last but not least, we have Nick Masci. Nick is a proud veteran and the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Industrialized Construction Group, ICG. With over 25 years of experience, Nick has been a leader in integrating AI and predictive analytics into construction manufacturing systems. He co-developed a robust construction manufacturing system at ICG, helping drive the sector toward a manufacturing framework. Now let's get started. I will kick it off to them. Thank you so much again, guys, for joining us.
Thank you, Mariela. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you.
So I think we're gonna just get going, and very excited to be here today. Definitely prefab, offsite construction has been moving forward in the industry when it comes to adoption. And we want to start first with, like really talking about the concepts in the space to bring clarity. And for that, I will invite both Nick and Andy to, share with us what is the terminology that they use and how this is influencing the industry when talking about offsite prefab.
Yeah, I mean, the way I view this is pretty simple. I mean, prefabrication is really anything that you're moving off the job site into a facility to do in advance, which is basically a tactic. Modular construction being more like volumetric type prefab, things like that. Nick, what is your view on this?
Well, I'm really happy to be having this conversation, and that we have this split into these, these two buckets here between tactics and strategy. As we talk about this, and you're going to hear this as a repeating theme throughout our talk, is, one question that kind of stopped me in my tracks a little while ago as an owner asked me, if prefab is such a win-win, why isn't there more winning? And I thought it was just a great question. And I think, we have the answer, and we're going to be talking about that today. It's because we don't really think about it as a strategy. We don't have it as a system. So when we think about prefab, I'm thinking about everything from simple components like different ways of connections and different smaller assemblies, moving up to larger assemblies. They could be single trade, could be a prefab. So I'm sure you know that plumbers and electricians have been doing their single trade prefab, like plumbing cassettes and HVAC units. They've been doing those for a long time. And then we moved into multi-trade assemblies, and that's where you see some greater complexity being brought into prefab. And so again, these are all just tactics about how to bring more of the work offsite. And prefab can happen on-site and off-site. And so really what we think about when I think about industrialized construction is the application of manufacturing techniques to the built environment. And that means that we're taking on everything from supplier development, moving from a vendor relationship to a supplier relationship, and thinking about how we can add more value offsite. And we're going to be touching on all of the problems that we're trying to solve through that.
Yeah, and I think, for me, that really, really highlights the strategy aspect of it, as Nick talked about. I mean, and this plays into a lot of where prefab fails or falters, is when you just approach it as a tactic where I'm going to move this labor from the job site over here to this factory and don't account for all of the other parts of the process that can leverage prefab, is where you get this kind of mixed result. I mean, and we'll get to this in some of the case study as well, where you really see the success is when you're integrating all the way up and down the value stream here of the process, and where that general contractor is viewing these projects more as the integrator, instead of just doing the exact same model and moving that fabrication off site.
Yeah, that word is really great. The integrator, and I think we are going to talk about that on this.
I love that, like concept clarification. This is also how we see it from the vendor world, just because the breakdown of the different types of prefab really makes a difference when deploying and adopting in the industry. And similar to what you were mentioning, Andy, when we're thinking about industrialization of construction, or when we're talking about how we call it at Building Ventures constructoring, we're actually talking about the methodologies from manufacturing apply in the construction industry. And that's also really broad, and it could go from just like software or changes to actual, like hardware stuff that comes into the field. Nick, you have engaged with a lot of stakeholders in the construction industry leveraging prefab. So how are the conditions in the market influencing this momentum that we're seeing in the adoption of prefab, and why this is happening now? Like why is different now, from like 10 or 20 years ago?
Well, I like to flip the script on labor shortages. I mean, we all know that the craft workers are leaving the industry faster than they're coming in. So, and we have a huge unmet demand for building stock. So, how can we turn that around and make that labor shortage into a catalyst for doing something different? And that's why I think one of the reasons that this mega moment is really happening and we're seeing this trend is because we're finding the ways to move it offsite. And that's what's on the right, some of the things that are making it happen. But the labor shortages are real. And so the ability, especially to get licensed craft people to be doing work on site is harder and harder. And there isn't a trade contractor on earth that won't tell you that doing work on site is the riskiest place. It's where they have their greatest risk and where they often lose their profit margin. So I think that this is a great moment to use this as a way to change. And really, we're going to get into one of the barriers, but there has been, I would say, not only a resistance to change, but almost an immunity to change. And this labor shortage is really causing people to change their behaviors because they have an urgent and expensive problem. So that's on the labor side. And then if we look at material pricing down at the lower part of this graphic, we all know that material prices have been crazy in fluctuation and long in lead time. So one of the market conditions is also if we can productize, if we can have a better idea of what we're going to build earlier and make those things such that we can build them within the cost and time, then we can be sending those signals into the supply chain and they can be prepping for that. So this is also about, I think one of the biggest levers to pull in this whole mega trend is in supplier development, in actuating the supply chain in a different way.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the same things that Nick just said. I mean, for me, the way I look at this is you have an inflection point around the outbreak of COVID where those labor shortages and labor costs really kind of change slope and how they're progressing through the economy. And I think at the same time, the virtual technologies were getting better and better and better. And you combine those two around that 2020 period and the ability to do these, these larger scale prefab, both from a technology and a needs standpoint, both kind of married up together. And I think, we're at this stage right now that's a little bit Wild West in this, because, lots of people are trying different things. But really that there really was this kind of sea change around the 2020 period that is really sparked the interest in this.
Right. Yeah. And then if you add all the amount of like data centers and manufacturing facilities for chips that need to be done and how quickly they need to get done, that just add pressure into both of these resources, right? Like how are you going to get every project needs to get done? Like you won't be able to get it done the way that it has been done over the last years. Nick, you and I had a conversation, and I really like when we talk about one of the reasons it's possible now is because of all the technology that has been building up in the past when we're talking about like BIM models, and the adoption of it in the industry now really allows you to have precision of what needs to be manufactured offsite and which probably wasn't possible 10 years ago just because the projects were not on BIM. There was like not that level of precision. And then if you add the generative design piece, which you can really iterate, we're at the early stages of that, but having more speed for iteration in the designs and having it on your fingertips, that's also influencing the adoption. Do you have more things to add there?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we just talk about the accuracy of the models that are being developed, now we have a very great precision in the X, Y, and the Z, so we know all of the different components on a job site. So not only does it mean that we can build off-site and have faith that when we bring them to the site, they're going to be able to fit, but also we can start to do something which I think is going to be coming next, which is really treating our job sites more like an air traffic control would treat them, and bringing them very close to the point of use so that they can be installed in a short amount of time. I walk job sites still, and it seems to me that like some of the things that get delivered are almost having birthdays on the job site instead of being installed. So I want them installed within 36 hours. You know, I just don't want them there very long because it just means you're going to have to move them. They're going to get damaged. Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to limit the owner's ability to make changes later. So there's all sorts of good things that are happening from the BIM adoption. It doesn't mean that you need to have a full model in order to take advantage of this, because I do often get that. And then if we think about the owner desire and match that with the industry pressure, you know, the owner desire, we do a lot of work in healthcare, and there's a big movement for outpatient clinics and moving the care closer to the population base. And we need to do that more quickly at a lower cost. So I would say on the left too, a big driver is to drive down the cost. And because in healthcare, cost equals access. So we need to be cognizant of that. And really also a big moment here is like I'm throwing out the three-legged stool of, you know, cost, quality, and time. I'm saying we can get all these things in this moment. And, you know, I'm tired of seeing you can only get two of those things and you always have to suffer with something else. This is a big moment. This is our industrial revolution in construction. And if we can take this mantle, we can have all of these things. I mean, we're going to get into a case study here and talk about, you know, kind of the nuts and bolts. So this is like kind of high level now, but, you know, get ready. And there's some behavioral changes that are going to be required.
As we move forward, and now we are, you know, talking about like why now, and you have spent a lot of time helping companies scale up their manufacturing operations. What are the most common pitfalls that you are seeing for GCs and trades when they try to move in this direction?
Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, I'll get started, Andy. No, we're ready. I mean, Liz, we're going to say this with love. I mean, this is a bucket of water, cold water, but we're saying this real with love and ambition. You know, if we look at any of these things, you know, resistance to change, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that have been doing great work in this industry and are really attached to the craft worker mentality. And this is something that we need to set aside, have some, you know, honor the craft worker, but also move into a manufacturing mindset and what that means. So, you know, do they have the right roles? So I would say, you know, we're going to move from a foreman to a team leader or a value stream leader. Do we have the right roles? A large electrical contractor said, I'm not a manufacturer. Tell me the 10 roles I'm missing. Tell me what I need to do. So there are people that are trying to figure out what this moment means. And I would say that some of this resistance to change, and thank you, HITT, for putting this on, because we have to take people into a state of conscious incompetence about what it takes to have a manufacturing mindset. And so that really means things like we have process engineers, we've got quality engineers. We don't have quality control. We do have that. We need it. But we have quality engineers. We're building quality into the process. And that'll help us with the standardization. So when we look at standardization, we're talking about not only a productized design, but do we have standard work? And again, this is something that doesn't really happen with the craft worker because we feel like they have got the knowledge and they'll figure it out on their own. When really what we should be saying is that the standard work, we trust that today's best method is the baseline for tomorrow's improvement. And so I want to see, is there standard work? Do we know what the tools are? Do we know what the actual cycle time is? How long it takes? Do we have work instructions that say how long it takes? So, you know, these are the things that we're looking for, and we're measuring, because what we want to measure in this moment is what are the process competencies. Andy, what are you seeing? And I've got some other thoughts on owner and supply chain readiness, which I think is a biggie.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I have a couple challenges in kind of my big bucket here of, prefab being, a learning curve, right? Like, so say a large GC institutes a project that's the first time they've ever played with prefab. That project is funded on a one-off basis. And so it is really difficult to move this forward because no one wants to be that guinea pig to move these forward for future improvements. And this will kind of come across in the case study that this is a little different dynamic when you talk about the data center space or the healthcare space that's doing a lot of repeat projects, and you have an owner that's willing to invest in that initial adjustment to going into prefab. And I think that's a really big barrier. I think another huge challenge for this is the industry is so fragmented that there is no single driver that moves this forward like you would have in tech or other industries that are much more consolidated, or automotive, right? You have those big market drivers that can just decide to change the way the market works. Here, it's a lot more of an inertia approach, which just makes it slower. And I think, this GC as integrator, we kind of keep coming back to this concept throughout. In all honesty, I think, the GC mindset of we're just going to keep managing projects the same way. And yeah, the subcontractors are moving their stuff off site. That's great. But that really doesn't take advantage of what prefabrication can do. And I think go ahead with Nick with the supply chain side of this.
Yeah, and I think Yep, Mayra.
Go ahead, Mayra.
And I just wanted to add, Nick, before you jump into the supply chain, when we're talking about like GC as an integrator, right? I think a lot of them are realizing of the huge potential that it's on prefab, or you have realized and are directly applying. At Building Ventures, we recently did a study on how many of the top 50 ENR GCs have their own prefabrication facilities for different assets, and it was like 54% of them. They have their own business units dedicated to manufacturing, and they are either doing it for internal, or also selling to other GCs. So that was a very interesting insight for us.
That's great. I mean, and they should be doing that because the cheese is moving. We have owners now that are elevating trade contractors to tier 1 suppliers. They're giving them direct contracts. So they can see that, go ahead and get in the game and try to help to be part of either the production component of it or be better as an integrator, learn how to do supplier development. And that goes to this owner and supply chain readiness. If you want to do this, we have to have the whole system working, and that means the owner too. I come from the trades, and you hear common phrases like this industry would be great except for the owners, and of course they're who we're creating value for. So the owners need a better way of evaluating their supply chain to see if they're ready. They need a better way of evaluating themselves, and without a way to evaluate the supply chain, we keep on vectoring work to suppliers that are not ready to meet the moment. And we're doing work now in the UK to help them with modern methods of construction because they've had some faltering around this. So they're starting to use our tool to assess whether the supply chain is ready. And for those that are ready, those are the ones that we're going to vector the work towards. So we want to create more case studies of improvement and prove it so that we can scale it up.
Right. Nick, I would pile on. Most of my career and background has been on the manufacturing side of this equation. And like what you just talked about is something we do all the time, like supplier development and readiness. If you ask any major manufacturer, they have entire groups that deal with this. And I think where this is going from a prefab standpoint has to be more meeting in the middle with manufacturing and construction, and moving construction more towards that manufacturing model instead of just doing construction in a factory. And that's a very different paradigm and a very different way of thinking about these projects in the long terms, both from an owner and a GC perspective. That's very different than the current way most operate.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes my knees buckle when I walk into a prefab facility and I see a 6-foot ladder and someone walking around with a tool belt. I'm like, what are we doing? Why is this person walking around like a handyman? We should know exactly the tool that is required.
So to move things forward, I would also, we have talked about the owners, the GCs, the trades, but before we jump into how we're looking at into the venture capital side of things, I want to touch quickly into the design side of things. Andy, you work with a lot of like architects. We know that many times these decisions need to be pushed early on.
Yep.
So do you have any insights on how to manage that push earlier?
Yeah, as a exclusively prefab company, we view our customer as the architect and owner. Obviously, the GCs who pays us, but we make or break whether we're moving forward with a project or if that project is going to be successful by integrating earlier up the value stream. And I think that's a place where most prefab companies would echo that similar sentiment. And that's why you have owners entering direct relationships with subcontractors and moving them up to tier 1 is for that exact reason, because we know how our product needs to go on a building better than the GC does, right? So why not work directly with the architect and move that further towards a complete design at the architecture level? And that's really, in my opinion, what makes or breaks these projects is being successful. The more that it's kind of a partnership at the higher up the stream, the better these projects typically work.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So I wanted to also share a little bit more of like how we look at it from the venture perspective. There has been a lot of some, high profile cases of efforts done when it comes to prefabrication that have failed. And we have been monitoring this space for a very long time. What we're seeing here is how we're thinking about the space. And we talked early in the presentation about terminology. That's the same way that we think about it from a venture perspective, and we go farther and do a little bit of like a breakdown, aggregating the solutions that we see in the market based on how they perform. And we can see here volumetric, ADUs, and software. We know this industry is very capital intensive, and therefore many times the growth model does not adjust to the venture model. And for people that are not familiar with the venture industry, we basically allocate capital for a percentage of the company with the hopes that within 10 years, that's the life cycle of most funds, will have a 10x return, which requires that the companies grow very quickly in an accelerated way. And what many times happen is that the growth is not as expected, and no wonder, because you actually have to build facilities that are going to be manufacturing all these prefab. So there are plenty of reasons why venture money may not be the right financing option for some or for most of these solutions. Where we see things are starting to change is more on the software side. And you can see here from this graph that's where most of the acquisitions had happened in the past. If we go to the next graph, we'll see how much capital has been basically lost, like gone to zero. This is capital from investors that have been put on prefab, and then it has gone to zero. Many companies actually find other ways of financing, and these are the ones that are actually going for raising, right? But there is so many more, and so many trades, so many GCs that do their own facilities and never take outside money to do so. And we see there is a huge potential for the prefab companies moving forward without ever having to take at least what we know as the venture capital money. And with that, I think we'll move forward to some of the use cases.
So let's go back to, kind of one of the themes here, which is prefab as a tactic and industrialized construction is the strategy. And we're going to talk about two pilots that ICG is running, one with the healthcare owner and one with the data center owner for some early indications of what is possible. So first of all, let's talk about what a BHAG is for me, and we'll go back to that 10-year frame, Mayra, which is I want projects that are 70% faster with 80% fewer on-site workers and 70% fewer deliveries. That's the kind of gains that we want from this moment in industrialized construction. This is the kind of things that happened in the Industrial Revolution. This is our moment. And so what we have developed is something called the ICMA, which is the Industrialized Construction Maturity Assessment, because supplier scorecards have been in mature manufacturing for decades, for a long, long time, but we haven't been able to do it because construction is so chaotic and there's no way you could ever measure something like that. So our system has 70 topics, and they go from looking at the bottom of this. There's different disciplines that must all be in play. And this is the systems thinking is strategy and culture, management systems, continuous improvement. Those are the things that get us ready. So the technical part, design and engineering, manufacturing, and sustainability can all flourish. And then they go from level 1 to 5, 5 being world-class, regardless of the industry. And level 1 down here, you can see is unstructured. And this is really where the industry is right now. We're in an unstructured and fragmented method right now, and that's why we don't have the real wins we want, and that's why in some of Mayra's instances, some of the venture capital isn't panning out. So if we look at a healthcare client that is, this is for outpatient clinics, although we do have another case study with a large tower where we did bathroom pods and limited the number of bathroom pods and had very great results. In terms of faster, fewer on-site workers and fewer deliveries, there are 25, 20, and 20. So these are fantastic numbers, but they still want more. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, why don't they? And we'll get to that in a second. So in healthcare is one where we're seeing this in some of the owner attributes that are not happening here is the owner is not actually evaluating themselves, and they don't have some of the requisite capabilities. And so we're moving into that next phase with this healthcare owner of evaluating how good are they at being the owner. So if we look in this further, then we're going to see that for the data center owner, because they've been working much more on productizing their platform, they're getting to 40, 30, and 40, and they're in a stabilized environment of all of these different disciplines. And this is something that I want the industry to move into in the next 5 years. Data centers obviously have a much more urgent and expensive problem than some of the other markets that are out there. So they've been able to productize their platform, and they're doing something that we haven't talked about yet with an owner behavior is they're making decisions earlier. This requires an owner to be much more present at the table and not always asking for a change in something. We have to know what new product introduction looks like, and that's another skill that's been happening in mature manufacturing, new product launch or new product introduction. These are skills that are already proven. Here's the good news, folks. These things, the manufacturing methods and NPI or NPL, they've been around for decades. What we need to do is make them relative to construction, because we do have some variability that Andy talked about where everything's different. So we do need to still attend to that. But at the same time, we should know that these gains are out there. And then if we move further into this, we're going to see this is where the future is that I've been talking about. And then if we click even further, we're going to see some of the insights, which is the healthcare owner is really productizing prefab at scale. They know a lot of the prefab things that they want, but they're not engaging in supplier development. So what does supplier development mean? It means that we know what the gaps are and we're helping to close the gap. at my previous company, we were an engineering firm and we worked for Boeing. Boeing took us under their wing and taught us their world-class operating system, and we had huge gains. Why don't we do that? I think we say that, and GCs say that trade partners are their greatest asset. We're only as good as our trade partners. But this is the time to put your money where your mouth is. And I would say to the owners and the GCs, we're paying for this anyway in higher costs and longer durations. So why not move into an era of supplier development where we can have enduring results? And if we look at the data center owner, they have self-reflection, they're looking at their own capabilities, and they're engaging in supplier development where they're sharing, they're saying, I'm going to give you a guarantee of demand, and these are the developments that we're going to work on together. And those developments are, where's your standard work? What are you doing for integrating automation into your factory? So we want to stabilize first, then we can scale with automation.
Right.
And then the future is going to be, all of this really is a key theme that I like to come back to, is we need the composite capabilities to be known for the portfolio or the project, because relying on one entity to carry the weight of prefab isn't going to work. And that's where I think we fall down. We put prefab in our RFPs, but we don't make it a system-wide way of measuring it and making sure that everybody has got the right capabilities. And we see companies, prefabbers, that have high capabilities that are low performers on projects because they're dragged down by the inefficiencies of others. This is like making a team. Like, you know, and if you made a baseball team and your infield couldn't field a ground ball and everything was going to the outfield, it doesn't matter how good the outfield is. So we need to understand these composite capabilities and have a way to make them better.
Yeah, I think that's great. That really highlights this integrator approach.
It really does.
Versus the the regular GC role.
And if we look at this, then, you know, if I'm looking at the gold one to the right, and we see now that what we're getting in terms of productivity gains, and these are not backward-looking gains. Everything we're doing is like shop floor focused. We're out there measuring cycle times. We're doing the actual studies, and these are 2x to 7x productivity gains. And I'm just, you know, again, on the case for prefab, we have all of these one-off gains. And I think if you go to conferences, you'll see people with fancy slides and they're talking about how great it was, but there isn't this repeatability. And that's what we're looking for. And that's what that ICMA is made to do. It's made to look at the composite readiness. What are the process capabilities? Because those process capabilities are the best predictors. And then if we look at those that are investing in supplier development, they're getting a 2x to a 7x productivity gains. I want those to go to 10 to 20. And then if we look on the other side, we're seeing that for those that are productizing without moving into supplier readiness, and the owners looking at themselves, and the GCs for that matter, then we still are getting some gains, but we're also still we're still leaking 10 to 30% in underperformance. So again, instead of absorbing these inefficiencies, how can we reinvest this money? And so this takes understanding how to actually do this, because I know owners are investing in this and they're bringing teams on board early and they're putting them in big rooms and they're doing all this advanced pre-con and they're still not getting the gains. So I feel your pain. And so what we really need are better methods for investing and improving the skills. We need to know what those gaps are and do it before the award. I mean, that's a big part on the right, is do it before the award. We don't want to wait until we hit the rocky waters to figure out that we weren't playing in the right space. I mean, as a company, I'm just telling myself right now, I'm not doing any more rescue missions. Like if someone comes to me and says, can you help my project because we want to see prefab can help him? Like, I don't know, you should have thought about this a long time ago. So maybe it's mean, but I think this is the strategy, is to move forward. Andy, you must have seen this 100 times on projects where you wish you were brought on earlier. And really, Andy is a guy who, and his company, knows how to act in that situation and isn't just waiting for a design.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a couple of things this highlights from the fabricator side in our case, or the prefabber, with a couple buckets to that. One, for us, we really care about consistent production, and this is where that supplier development comes in. Like as a GC, when you normally work with a trade partner, if you don't buy something with them for a while, kind of tough luck, but they don't have a huge overhead to cover as a prefabrication company. So to get the gains from prefabrication, that prefabrication company obviously has to stay in business and have consistent output. And this is a little bit of the chicken and egg option when it comes to prefab is you need enough demand and enough market pull to support that prefabber. And I think, we're finding that, but all construction is basically somewhat batch done, right? Because every job's a little bit different. You can't pre-make items. And that's where, Nick touched on this earlier, where the real holy grail for prefab is you have some form of standardization that allows prefabbers and people, whatever they're doing, to be working on output that isn't necessarily specific to a job and then bringing that into customization later. There's lots of ways that can get skinned. But, for us, that standardization is a big component of this. Like, we can't make, like we make building exteriors. If I make 1,000 parts and there are 1,000 different versions, that's a nightmare for a fabrication facility, right? The more that drives towards standardization and standard building blocks, no matter what you're doing, is where you really get that, 7, 10, 20x productivity gains. And those really have to go hand in hand with the design side. And that's why this is such in all honesty, a little bit of a difficult egg to crack, because there's so many players in the stream, from owners to architects to structural engineers, to the prefabber, to the GC. All of these people have to kind of align in what they're doing. And, that's where, I think Nick and I would agree on this, is moving that further up the value stream towards the owner is where this really needs to happen.
Yeah, one quick tack onto this. Yeah, go ahead, Mayra.
It's like, I love that you bring up again standardization, and like from the venture perspective, we are always looking at things that are like 3, 5, 10 years in the future, and we're seeing this shift. We recently invested in a company, it's called Build Factory. They do a marketplace for prefab, specifically MEP though. And however, that's only possible if there is a standardization. And the second thing is, like, it's interesting to see when we're thinking about capacity and ensuring same capacity over time, some of the fabrication shops buying from other fabrication shops because they may not have enough capacity, but they don't want to build more capacity for this one job, right? So great that you like bring this up and how this is shifting currently in the industry.
Yeah, we have a second to talk about DFMA. So this is a big topic, which is DFMA is designed for manufacturing and assembly. And so really one of the goals of this is only design what the machine can build or what the factory can build. And how construction has worked in the past is you can make up any design you want, and then we figure out how to build it. So really, we want to interrogate the supply chain to figure out what they actually can make. And this includes our trade partners or suppliers like Andy, and then designing around that. And we should be elevating their known designs of how they do it so that we can be making the design fit that. And so really the design needs to be in support of what the manufacturing can do. And if we do that, most of the cost in the building is in the things that we don't see. And I would say that if we do this, we are going to unlock all sorts of potential, and you can luxuriate in the design because all the things behind the walls and above the ceilings that you don't see will all be standardized. And honestly, it's a moral imperative. The first thing to show up and the last thing to leave a job site is a dumpster. And we throw 28 to 35% of what goes onto a job site into the dumpster, and the scrap rate in a factory is 1 or 2%. And we should be designing material out of our designs. That's another part of design for manufacturing and assembly. I think our buildings are Frankensteins. They are way too big. They're overweight. They're hard to transport. They're too hard to lift. They're unsafe. I go on. And then we throw 30% in the dumpster. So this is a big moment, and generative design is going to play a big role in this. And doing thousands of permutations on these things to get down to the right designs.
So yeah, that's a great point. And with that, Nick and Andy, I will open up to questions of the audience that is here today in the call. Since you mentioned, like the existing current constructions, I think there is a question that perfectly aligns with that. And maybe Nick, you can answer this for us. Prefabrication works great for new builds, but we are seeing a lot of issues with existing building infrastructure that creates problems with installation. How have you handled and/or mitigated risk installing prefabricated material into existing conditions? I mean, you have worked with a lot of prefab companies that are doing prefab, or Andy, if you have any insights on this.
Yeah, well, and I think I do. This is a place that we're playing in, because of the nature of our product. Like reskinning existing buildings is something we're looking at doing. This plays into the current state of technology. Really helps this in that it's pretty easy to say LiDAR scan a current condition, and then adapt your product or fit your kind of standardized envelope of product onto that, and do this with some of these more advanced software tools where you can prefab it. And I would actually argue that prefab is more valuable to is just as or more valuable to existing buildings, because they typically are, wanting to be used for something relatively quickly, right? Like, say you have an apartment building that you want to reskin. Well, now everyone has to come out of that building, or they're, you're localized evicting people to do something to their apartment. So, this is where, I think prefab can really, really excel into these remodeling spaces, but it hinges so much on, where we're at on the, the software and technology side to really help that.
Yeah.
I have another question here, and I'm just going to make sure that we cover most of them. Nick, you work with a lot of owners. So what is the impact in change in the scope of work, especially when the owner haven't witnessed work that is being completed and challenges associated with CO claims?
Well, I think that the rate of CO claims is directly proportional to the competency of and the ability of the supplier to act in an early environment. So again, we're going to see that go down as you have supply chain members that are of higher competency. On that chart that I was showing from level 1 to 5, I can directly correlate that. So I can say that those that are at the higher level, the rates are going to go down. If they're at a lower level, there's going to be a lot less it's going to look more like traditional construction. So I think that what the owner again needs to do, I'm going to be beating the same drum, is the owner needs to be able to measure the competency of themselves and of the supply chain to understand what their competencies are to act in this arena, and that I'm going to say that they're directly proportional to their level of competency.
Yeah,
I hope I'm answering that right.
But yeah, I would also argue, by the owner spending a little bit more on the front end and driving that design further down, which is, one of the things we've been talking about with prefab, is to bring that prefab further up in the design, which in some cases requires the owner to bring the design to a further completion level before it goes out to construction. And in a lot of cases, that does cost a little bit more to the owner. But, I would argue that reduces the overall cost of the project in most cases by reducing the amount of CO claims, because, there are a lot of, you're just mitigating a ton of missteps in design by bringing in those prefabbers earlier. And the prefabbers assuming a lot of the risk inside of their own systems. If they screw up their own system, there's no change order there, right? The more you drive to a prefab, the less of those change orders you'll have.
And I'll now move to some of the questions submitted earlier. Andy, for someone that is starting out in the prefab world, what are some early changes and pitfalls that you have seen that can be easily avoided?
I think It depends what kind of prefab you're into, but some of my key takeaways for that is obviously moving further up the stream is a big deal. I think that can be really, really helpful. But probably bigger is kind of taking your construction hat off a little bit and putting on a manufacturing hat. Like, as we talked about through the course of this, just moving your tradespeople over to a factory can have some minor benefits, but where you really get the benefit is bringing in people that are familiar with manufacturing. And Nick's company does a lot of this, of helping construction companies transition over to that manufacturing environment. And I think that's probably the key takeaway is, you need to think about it a little differently and approach it a little differently if you want to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a special cat to work in this space as when you're transitioning, either you're a trade partner or you're a GC doing this, and bringing over your most accomplished general foreman or superintendent probably isn't going to work. The skills that they have they understand how things go together in the field. So they'll be good from the field delivery experience perspective, but I would encourage people to find manufacturing skills or upskill those people, because I have found people that are definitely they've been waiting for this moment their whole careers, and like, oh, why is this coming so late in my career? Well, better late than never. And you're not on your knees anymore. And from a safety and an ergonomic perspective, there's also another imperative here. I mean, this industry is a very challenging one. We injure people, we wear their bodies down. This is also a big moment to have respect for people. The ergonomics should be near perfect in a factory. There's no more heavy lifting required. If you see that going on when you're on your tours, then that's a problem. The first thing I look for is the work unburdened, and that's a great sign of respect for folks. I'm sure that safety's on everybody's mind, and we paid great attention to it in our industry, and with good reason, and now we can take it to another level.
I have another question here for you, Nick. Using the ICMA framework, what best practices have you seen for coordinating multi-trade MEP racks in an off-site manufacturing environment to reduce rework and field clashes?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because again, a multi-trade rack is going to take multi-trades. So that means that we need to understand the competencies of everyone to work within that, to bring together design, to bring together their supply chain, replenishment systems. And then we have to think about the logistics, and we have to think about what happens in the field. Now, a good portion of the work that we're doing right now is for owners that are not seeing all the value transmitted to the field, because we're losing it in installation because people don't understand what it actually takes to install them. So again, using the ICMA to understand the competencies in the factories, in the logistics, and in the field install is required. And we're taking this to the next level now with something called discrete event simulation. So we're doing modeling of the different scenarios that can happen, and modeling it all the way through from the factory all the way to the install, so we can be predictive of what's going to happen. And the discrete event part means we can try different levers and see what would work and what wouldn't work. And this gives us a better idea of what to expect. And again, if we see the gap, then we can engage in supplier development.
And I just want to be mindful of time. Do we still have a minute?
We have 5 minutes.
Yeah, one other thing about the ICMA is that when people get their score, I say to owners, we are not going to weaponize this. First of all, when someone gets their score, it's theirs to share if they want or not. And so, in that regard, your score is your score. But for every single time we've done this, everybody has met it with relief. Like, oh, I finally know what my current condition is and what the target condition is and what the gap to close is. And that's a big relief. So you can use it to help form your strategy or to help with a portfolio of projects moving forward. So I always say, just tell me what the current condition is and what the target condition is, and I'm off to the races. And this is very much a can-do industry. So again, another, I think a good indicator that this industry is ready for this moment. And, with everybody on this call, I'm hoping that this can be a call to action for you to, find what your small part is to help change the behaviors.
I'll put one final question for the three of us, and it's related to AI. Do you see AI having an impact on the future of prefab?
1,000% yes. I mean, we use it. We do a whole bunch of different things with AI internally, from having closed sandboxes for knowledge base so that people in our manufacturing environment can understand what our engineering department would do without having to take an hour of their time to explain it. They can just ask the chat bot, and it has a lot of that knowledge, like simple things like that. I think engineering wise, there's a huge amount of evolution that's going to happen here over the next 10 years with driving designs through AI and minimizing the time frame it takes to design these. And a lot of that generative AI has the ability to know what your rules are from a manufacturing perspective, and it drives that design inside of that framework. And I know this is a place Nick spends a ton of time, so I'm going to give him a chance to chime in on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've already talked about simulation modeling, so we're harnessing AI to help us with our simulation models. And then the other thing that I think is really going to be critical for the industry is we're very sluggish when it comes to leading indicators. We have these lagging indicators, job site reports that sometimes are monthly, and we really don't know what the status is at all times. So we're harnessing it for telemetry. We want to know what's going on in the moment. And so the better we can have an understanding of, are we ahead or behind, and what is the current condition, and what's the gap, then we can be more responsive. We can have better root cause analysis. Then we can do some of the traditional continuous improvement and structured problem solving, which is a huge gap also that we could have a whole nother webinar on about that this industry needs is, better feedback loops and structured problem solving. But those are the places that we're seeing it in telemetry and modeling.
Yeah, I mean, from feedback loop perspective, right? Like, we're seeing a big change when it comes to robotics and how quickly you can run iterations. And this is all possible through the new models of AI. And historically, robotics have been hardware, but now the possibilities for iteration and their applications in the construction industry and learning from what's happening on the field, which has been always a hurdle, are looking hopeful that this could be, like in the next 5 to 10 years, actually having robots doing, bringing value to the field, but also for offsite construction for a specific task. And then the other piece that maybe we were talking earlier, and Andy, you mentioned high level on it, is the speed of scan to BIM, right? Like how transforming those, and now you have companies that have been transforming scan to BIM for so many assets, like large amount of data, that they can train AI models to do it in seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd echo the robotics standpoint. I mean, one of the problems with construction has been the low mix or high mix, low volume nature of construction. And, AI has really opened the door to robotics. I mean, we face that. We have robotics in our facility that I may paint one shape 3 times, and then I got to paint 60 of that and 4 of that and 9 of that. Without the ability to do that, it just gets so prohibitively expensive and slow that AI allows us to do that, in a couple minutes.
And I think with that, we are on time.
Yes. Thank you so much. Just wanted to say thank you again for the 3 of you for joining, Mayra for moderating, and everyone that joined today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days. I know we could go on for hours talking about this, and but I just want to say thank you again, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.